Alaska, a frozen frontier, abundant with moose and other wildlife that can survive the unforgiving cold. Regardless of the harsh environment, some have found a way to survive, an example of which is the town of Nome.
In the 1920s, the problem in Nome was an outbreak of diphtheria.
When this outbreak occurred, Nome had to reach out to Nenana for help.
In 1925, the year the outbreak occurred, a group of sled dog teams rushed to bring the antitoxin to Nome in order to save many lives. Shortly after the antitoxin was delivered, there was a statue erected in Balto's and Togo's honor.
Balto and Togo were the lead sled dogs of the two most well known teams. Balto's, which did the last leg of the relay, and Togo, which did 5 times the distance as every other team, with each other team doing a 30-mile leg of the relay.
Later, the modern Iditarod was formed, and the movies Balto and Togo were filmed. The modern Iditarod follows two different paths and is a sled dog race in Alaska. It is very long.
These three things are still watched on TV today.
Now for the story.
Nome, a small town in Alaska, hundreds of miles from the nearest settlement, a quiet town, oblivious of what was to come.
At the time, the main method of transportation to and from Nome in winter was via sled dogs. Most other methods of transportation were only available in summer. Normally, this was fine. However, that was not the case in Nome.
And then disaster struck. The everyday life of Nome was interrupted by an outbreak of diphtheria.
Without their antitoxin to cure the rapidly spreading outbreak, they had to resort to more desperate measures.
Nenana had the antitoxin and said they would give it to Nome, but there was still one issue. At the time of the outbreak, another obstacle appeared, in the form of the worst storm in the history of Alaska.
How would they transport it from Nenana to Nome? There were no cars in Nome, and the closest train station was even further than Nenana. And there were planes, but they wouldn't make it, not through the storm.
Once again, the town had run into a wall of bad luck, and then the solution hit them: sled dogs.
But no one dog team could bring enough antitoxin in time. They would die from the cold, and Nome would die from the virus by the time it could have possibly reached them.
So the relay was formed. Each team carried the antitoxin 30 or so miles and passed it on to the next team, eventually making it to Nome and saving the town.
Fitting the theme of communication, Nome first had to send many letters saying that it had an outbreak of diphtheria that was rapidly spreading and could wipe out the town if not dealt with. Had they not done this, the Iditarod would not have started.
They also had to communicate the relay and who would be at what relay points, along with who would be involved.
Also, without communication, the mushers would have been unable to go where they wanted, as the dogs would have ran every which way and not taken them to Nome.
Without communication, Nome would not have made it through the disease, and nobody could have helped them. This means that without communication, none of the things above would have happened, and Nome would not have made it. And after the 1925 serum run to Nome was over, it left an effect on modern-day life and history.
One of the largest and fastest changes that it made was saving the lives of the people who had diphtheria. A slower change was helping to inspire the modern Iditarod that some people watch on TV.
2 movies and 2 statues were also made. These movies and statues were made for the lead sled dogs of the 2 most well-known teams. These 2 teams were Togo's and Balto's. Togo ran over 4 times the distance of any other team, And Balto was simply the lead of the team that delivered the antitoxin. No one, not one team, did the whole race. However, they should all have credit for helping Gnome with such a deadly problem.
And despite how fast they went, getting a record time of 5.5 days, making it around 1,000 miles, there were still the deaths of at minimum 5 children who were confirmed in Nome who died before the antitoxin could have possibly showed up, and some of them died before they even knew what was spreading. And that is what happened to Nome in 1925 and how they overcame it.
The 1925 Serum Run to Nome saved many lives and, as you can see here, involved more than a little communication.